First order of business,
Recording.
that would be one. Try to get some stuff set up here so I can see.
Recording.
Excellent. All right, today, technical session number 34, we are going to be diving into configuring Windows, predominantly focusing on the control panel and where you'll need to go to find a lot of these items you will want to configure and where they are located in each version, as they love to move this stuff around every time they update the system. Objectives for this particular technical session: describe how you can use the control panel to customize the operating system for a client, describe the key steps and considerations when configuring Windows for a client, and identify common pitfalls that can occur when you're configuring Windows and how to solve them. Behavior skills and mindsets, customer focus. We do understand that a lot of times when working with customers, it tends to be user error, but we also need to bear in mind that we need to handle that situation delicately, make sure that they feel that their problems are heard and that you understand where they're coming from and be able to handle those problems. Maintaining a growth mindset, always understanding that we are continually learning, and to be in this industry, we do need to continue to understand the new versions coming out, how to address these problems so that we can better serve our customers going forward. First, we're going to do a basic overview of the control panel. This is probably the main place you're going to turn to when you're going to configure any settings within the Windows ecosphere. And as we had stated before, they tend to move it around a little bit. It is a centralized location to kind of control how the entire system is going to look and feel and operate, things like that. And you can configure it to a point to fit those needs, and utilize different themes so that it looks the way you like it to look. You can change your settings on your mouse. If you're a left-handed person, you could change your mouse over to a left-handed mouse. If you prefer to only have one click on things to have them open, you can set it up to do that. You can set it up to do 3 clicks. There's lots of different things that you can change. You can change the formatting of your keyboard. Instead of using a QWERTY keyboard, you can change it over to a Dvorak keyboard if you so choose. If you feel that's more efficient for you and you want to, take that route, that's something you could also do within the control panel. The programs that populate the control panel, they're called applets. And they allow you to customize and personalize the system to fit your needs. Each version of Windows tends to have some applets that remain the same across all versions. Some of them change over time. One of the ones we talked about yesterday was the Windows Firewall, which got upgraded to Windows Defender Firewall. And then the File Explorer eventually became Windows Explorer, things like that. They do sometimes make small changes with regards to their names and just understanding what changes they are making so that you can easily find what you need. There's also applets that have very, very specific hardware like Adobe and QuickTime, and also NVIDIA. Questions so far? Now, where is it located? It's in a different place in each location. Windows 7, click Start button, and it should be located right there in that Start menu. I believe it is, when they give you the 2 columns, it's right off to the right-hand side. You'll have Control Panel, My Computer, all that fun stuff in there. Windows 8 or 8.1, you either swipe the right corner of the screen or use the mouse to activate the Charms menu, and that will allow you to reach Control Panel. In Windows 10, click the Start button, scroll until you see Windows System, and then click on it, and it will show a drop down for the control panel itself. Once you get into the control panel, you can even adjust the control panel appearance to match your current, preferences and or needs. You could have it done by category. So you want to go into security, then from security, you can go look for the firewall or something like that. Or you could have it just list the different things that are located in there in large and small icons. I personally prefer the small icons because it makes it easier for me to, find what I need rather than trying to remember off the top of my head which version I'm on and what subcategory they put it in. But it'll be mostly your personal preference or the personal preference of the clients you are working with. Here is a topical view of the category one, and it just kind of puts everything into groups based off of generalized categories. As you can see, you got your hardware, security, network, user accounts, all that stuff. You can kind of click on this and it'll bring you into another subcategory, list off some more, and then you can check on one of those categories, select on that, and then it'll bring you into, a deeper layer or, offer up applets that you can click on at that point. If you can't remember which category it is, but you know the name of the applet you're trying to locate, you can always use the search function, which should take you right there. Questions so far? All right. Here's the other view, which has basically everything that is within the control panel, but viewing it as large icons. And then you would just scroll down, locate the applet you wish to use, go ahead and double click on it to go ahead and activate it. Or again, you can use the search function if you already know what the name of it is to take you straight to it. And then finally, small icon view gives you more per page. If you feel like this is a little bit too much of a crowded view, too many things on the screen, you can always go back to the larger icon view. All right. Going through the category view, basically have 8 categories, group specific, that you can go through and find specific applets in a meaningful way based on their overall use. Categories we're going to be going over: system and security, network and internet, hardware and sound, programs, user accounts and family, appearance and personalization, clock, language and region, and ease of access. Now, remember how I was telling you before that you need to know the map for mapping for a particular file, where they would say, you click on where we were showing, where it showed programs, files, Billy's files, accounting, and then like the technical session, just kind of going down the line. They will require you to remember mapping to get to certain things. And so like the first part of that map would be control panel. Then the next map, then it would be like / system and security, / Windows Defender firewall. You would need to know the maps to get to these things. We will go over some of them, but also it helps if you have access to a Windows computer, messing around with this stuff a little bit, clicking into your folders, finding where things go, just to kind of give yourself a general idea as to where they're going to put a lot of these little applications. Big ones to find are like event viewer, task manager, your program files, Windows Defender firewall. These are like a lot of good ones just to kind of know how to get to them based off of the system mapping. Questions so far? All right. System and security. Break down almost everything with regards to the security of the system. You have your update managers, power options. So you, as we saw in the previous slide, where you could set like your hibernation settings, brightness on your screens, your UPS devices, all of that stuff, you can set those up in this one particular location. Backup and restore, BitLocker for your encryptions, Action Center lets you know when it will trigger you to let you know that you have an update or a security issue or any kind of stuff, thing like that. Your Windows firewall, you can set, your rules of the firewall in there if you want. you know, either using whitelisting or blacklisting. And you can set the level to which it will be secure. Again, convenience versus security. If you want more convenience, unfortunately, it requires less security, and vice versa. So you have to figure out what your risk appetite is, what you're willing to accept in order to gain the convenience that you need. Questions so far? Still waking up.
Mr. Kelly, you're talking about the firewall, right? The Windows firewall, or in
Well,
general?
just various things that are here inside system security. But one of the things like the Windows firewall, the more secure your firewall is, the less convenient it will be for you whenever you're operating out in the internet.
Got it.
Because if you start going to different websites and certain things like that, it, you know, as they're trying to install cookies or do different things like that, it's going to ping your firewalls and say, hey, are you okay with this? You install a new program, the new program is going to try to reach out to the internet for updates. The system's going to ping you and go, hey, are you okay with this? Now, it's a good way to kind of find out which one of the programs in your systems are actually utilizing the network or trying to contact the networks. But, you know, overall, if you, when you first turn it on, it can sit there and keep dinging you about every 5-10 seconds every time something's going to do check in with the applications or over the systems.
Got it. Yeah, it'll be if you want more convenience, it will affect your security or vice versa. Got it.
Now, yeah, Windows or Mac, I don't believe they yet have or their own built-in malware and firewalls and stuff yet. I mean, they have very, very light security, but I mean, I use something called Mac Defender, and it has its own built-in firewalls, VPNs, anti-malware, anti-spyware, all that stuff. So as far as built into the main suite that they give you, no, not really. You actually would need to go get third-party software for something like that. And always remember, and they
But
say
Kelly,
Macs are immune to viruses.
I was just about to say that.
A lie.
But Kelly, I thought Macs can't get viruses.
That is a lie. They absolutely can. So something to bear in
Like
mind.
he's speaking from first-hand experience.
Not for me, but I do know people that have gotten them. But yeah, it's because of few factors, it tends to be significantly more rare that they get viruses. There's two distinct factors for it, but it does happen. And the more people adopt Mac, the more one of those factors goes away, which is there's really, you know, they're going for the biggest bang for their buck. If they're creating a virus or something like that, they're going to go for the biggest marketplace because they'll have the largest opportunity to be able to actually get some return on their investment, rather than pointing at, you know, 10% of the market. They're going to point at 85% of the market. So it's just hasn't been worthwhile a lot of the time for many hackers, although that is starting to change, especially with you have the, as Chris put it, the Apple myth, where these people believe that there's no way they can get a virus, so they do nothing to protect their computers, and their computers are just wide open.
Speaking about that, did you guys see there's a new version of the Spectre exploit? It affects almost all AMD and Intel chips.
I did not see that.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to exploit, like, from what I was reading. So no, you don't really need to worry about it. But yeah, it affects almost all Intel and AMD chips.
Interesting.
Which is surprising at a time when Apple is moving to their own silicon, their own M1 processors.
Well, that's probably when they would let it slip.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it affects everything, but we're going to have our own proprietary chips that aren't going to be affected by this. It'll be affected by a whole slew of other things, but you're going to be safe from the Spectre thing. So give it time. But no, I'd be interested in reading up on that just out of curiosity. So I'll have to look into that. All right. Next, network and internet. This is where you would set up your home groups, all your typical internet options, network sharing, Wi-Fi, Ethernet, all of that done in this one particular location. If you have a mobile device like a laptop, you'll notice a lot of times when you go to like Starbucks, whenever you get introduced to a new Wi-Fi network, it'll ask you, is this a work Wi-Fi? Is this a public Wi-Fi? Or is this a home Wi-Fi? And that's going to automatically trigger different security levels when you select those. So don't ever select Starbucks as your home Wi-Fi, even if you feel like you live there a lot of times, because you're just really opening yourself up to a whole lot of problems. Because there's a lot of people that hang out in Starbucks. They're not there for the coffee. They're there for your information. So, but here's where you would go to set all those things up. Initially, when you initialize your computer, first time to turn it on, it's going to ask you to select a network, give the security credentials. If it's Wi-Fi, select the SSID, put in your password, all that fun stuff. If you are going to allow file sharing on your network, it'll allow you to say, hey, I'm allowing these particular computers to contact this machine. And when they do contact this machine, they're allowed access to these specific file groups. All of that can be set up through this particular category in the command line or control panel, excuse me, not command line. I need more coffee, apparently. All right, if I only drink coffee.
Right.
Hardware and sound. Vast majority of the peripherals you utilize, including your monitor, would be managed through here. Your networking printers, even just hooking up a hard line to a printer so that you can access it and utilize it, stuff like that. You would go in here. This would allow you to initiate it, get in there, set them up, and then make sure whatever one you're using is the proper drivers, because you might have an HP 5327, but the driver that's installed on your computer is just a HP 5000 series, which will give you the very basic drivers for that printer. And it'll allow you to print, but you won't get all the best bells and whistles, like if you want to print grayscale, or if you wanted to print on both sides of the paper, or what have you. You may not have all that functionality in that general driver, so you need to go in here, devices and printers, update your drivers so that you would be able to utilize everything. Questions so far with regards to hardware and sound? Basically, all your input output devices located here. Also gives you some power options for laptops as to, what the device would do as far as low power mode. Do you even want to use low power mode? And what systems would be affected when you do utilize it. All
Where do you
right.
update your drivers again?
Your drivers? Well, like if you're going to do like drivers on your printer,
Okay.
that would be under your devices and printers. You can do it there. There are other locations you can do it, but this would just be, for the sake of if you were doing like installing a printer or whatever, being able to go in and just update your drivers.
Got it.
All right. Programs. Here would be a lot of the default ones that you would typically get on your system, much like, Adobe Reader used to be readily installed, QuickTime Video. I'm gonna date myself and say Minecraft, or was it Minecraft? Was the one that used to be on there in Solitaire. But you can go in here and you can uninstall those things, especially if you're doing on a work computer. You don't necessarily want them playing games all day. But will allow you to add and remove desktop gadgets, small program, applets and things like that. All that can be pretty much controlled from this particular window. Uninstalling programs, if you want to get rid of it, don't just delete it. You actually run an install. So if it does install pieces of that in your startup menu and stuff like that, it won't still clog up your startup menu if you forget to delete all the files. The uninstall should go through and wipe everything out rather than just straight trying to delete it. All right. User accounts and family. This is where you would kind of set up your groups. It's like your group rules or whatever, where you can set up individual accounts for each of your family members, because you don't want to have just a universal sign in on that computer. You will have your administrator sign in, and then you typically will only use the administrator sign in when you are going to do higher level things on the computer. You will set up an account for yourself, like this is your personal computer, you have your administrator account, and then you will set up a user account for yourself. Only use the user account unless you need to sign in as an administrator. And then you can set how much availability or access they have to that particular computer. If you're dealing with younger kids, you can, set parental controls saying, they can only view materials that are X, rating, G or PG or whatever you want. Or if you have family members you want to mess with, you can go ahead and set parental controls for them too. However you want to utilize it. And then your credentials. You can use this to manage, your sign-ins for your job or, different websites you use and things like that. You can use it also in the credentials. You should be able to locate your public and private keys. Private key should be shared with no one. Public keys tend to be exchanged when you're going to be dealing with encrypted emails and or files. Questions so far?
I just got one quick question.
right.
I don't know if it's been updated, but I know this happened once before, like I think it was like Windows 98 or something. But is it true that if you create multiple user accounts, it could also slow down your system?
Not necessarily, not nowadays. But I'm not, I'm not familiar with that happening in the earlier versions, but I've
Right.
never heard instances of that happening now.
But I will say this, Kelly, if you have multiple accounts, that means you have multiple users. And if your multiple users are using up a lot of the hard drive and things of that nature, of course it's going to slow down. Like if your kids both have iTunes accounts or they load up all their music and games, that's taken away from the performance of the heart of the system. So it
Fair point.
can slow down in theory, but it's slowing down because of the use. That could have just been under one user who filled it up with all that stuff too, and it's going to slow down. So the performance is tied towards what resources you're taking up. And if you think about it, if you have several individuals using the PC and they got it customized to their liking, they may be adding so much along when doing that it could affect the performance.
I can see also if you're running tight on RAM and your system's relying a little heavier on page files.
That's true.
To kind of supplement that, and you're butting up against that memory with store, like using up the storage with multiple users, that could have a serious lagging effect on the computer as well. So yeah, I can see it under certain circumstances. Yes.
Under circumstances, there you go. That's it.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Mm-hmm. Appearance and personalization. This is where you would come to make it look as pretty as you want to make it. If you want it to be like a starry night theme and everything would have celestial themes to it, you could go here and do this. Some of them do nautical themes. Some of them do, cartoon themes or anime themes, various things like that. In here under appearance and personalization, that's where you would go to either download those things to it so you can utilize them, or go ahead and select from the array that they already have in place on the computer. You could adjust the way your taskbar and start menu is. You could have it set up to where it's permanently visible on the bottom, where it hides when you're not using it. You can even have it go over to either side of the computer or even come down from the top. If that is more useful to you and more functional for you, you can sit here and make these adjustments in here to make that happen. Also set up your desktop gadgets, what you want to have available, and your text. If you're a person, like myself, with eyes are getting a little worse for wear over time, you might want that larger text. Me, I'm kind of comfortable with about 4 letters per page, and I just kind of scroll through it a little bit faster. But you might be somebody that it's annoying to have, I can't have as many things on the page as I would like, and I can read much smaller text. It's more efficient for me. You can make the text much smaller so that you can fit more icons, more words per page. All that can be set here in your display settings as well, and it will auto adjust screens to fit for that. Questions so far on that? All right. Also, fonts and other fun stuff as well. If you're somebody who gets into graphic design, they're really big on fonts. The 10,000 that are located on the computer at any given time are not even remotely enough. When you're talking to a graphics designer, they tend to download files with hundreds of thousands of different font styles on there for the various things that they will use for businesses and creating adverts and different stuff. So they're really, really big on fonts. Questions with regards to that? All right. Clock, view, the language and region. This is one of the biggest ones that they like to ask about for you to map. It's like, if I want to go change the date and time settings on my computer, what would be the path I would take? So this is where you would need to know to click on which files, or you go into date and time, and then there's like 2 or 3 other steps beyond that. And you need to know the right sequential order to click on those. But we will get into that as well. Questions? A lot of this stuff tends to correct automatically if you allow it. Once it talks to the network, speaks to its local DNS servers and other servers and stuff like that, it gets a ping back, lets it know what time it is, what time zone you're sitting in, date, all that fun stuff, and automatically updates it. But say you move to California, but your office is still located in North Carolina, and you want to maintain all those time settings on the computer, you can auto set it so that it will match the Eastern time zone rather than Pacific, because that matches up with your place of work if you wish to do that. Questions so far? All right. Ease of access. Typically, this is where they hide the speech recognition. This is something that is becoming more and more utilized with, what is the name of the personal assistant for Microsoft?
Cortana.
Cortana. What is she famous for?
Being in Halo.
There you go. I just wanted to see. All right, so you got Cortana for Google, or for Microsoft, excuse me. What is it for Apple?
Siri.
Siri. And for Google?
Google.
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 Hey,
Well, hey Google.
Hey,
yeah.
Google.
Hey, Google.
Don't let that fall.
So yeah, they definitely, you will want to remember the names of various virtual assistants. So virtual assistants. Do what? I didn't hear it. So yeah, you definitely will need to know the virtual assistants for each one. Used to be that when you would utilize something like that or talk to text, various things of that nature, you would need to go through speech recognition, where it would ask you to read a series of paragraphs or different sounds so that the computer can understand what it is that you're saying, because we all have different accents. If you're, from down in the South versus in the North versus out West, or even from, over in Europe, or if like English wasn't your first language, so you still carry over some of that accent, it needs to be able to understand the different ways you say these particular words. So it would ask you just to read a couple of different paragraphs, and then the on-site computer will be able to translate that into text and work for you. Who knows what they do now? Does anybody know what they do now? They don't actually, the majority of it, like if you ask a command, like one of those personal assistants, it isn't always done. It isn't always done on that device. That's why it needs an internet connection.
It's in the cloud, right?
It's what?
It's in the cloud, right?
Well, if you ask it and it doesn't understand you, it'll send it out and a computer will listen to it real quick, like a much more powerful computer than you're operating off of. And then if that can't figure it out, then a person listens to it. And the person will, give the proper command via text. And then they will save that recording for later to help with the machine learning. So there are a lot of times when there actually is a person responding to that command you're giving to Alexa or Siri or Cortana or what have you. That's why it requires the internet connection. All right. Here is a various array of applets within the control panel for various things that we use from day to day. I do have a pretty good one for the Windows troubleshooting? But we'll kind of go through all of these real quick. Internet options, display settings, user accounts, folder options, systems, Windows firewall, power option. I am in the South. Programs and features, home group, devices and printers, sound, troubleshooting, network and sharing, and device manager. Go through all these real briefly. Internet options, configurations, configures all the settings for your internet. We kind of went over this a little bit early, and gives you, your general connection, where, what group you're going to be connected to, especially if you're utilizing Wi-Fi, what security you're going to be employing, if you're going to be using like WPA2 or something along those lines, privacy, do you want your SSID to be broadcast? Are you going to allow cookies, stuff like that, the various types of connections, and then it will have other advanced options as well within there. Display settings. This is where you will go to set your resolution, the amount of color you can utilize, and the refresh rate. Now, the very basic settings on a display device, monitor, any monitor, what do we call it? The resolution that the system operates best under, what do we call that?
Native.
Native resolution.
Native resolution. Very good. Native resolution. All right. User accounts. We went over this one briefly earlier. It's where you get to go and you set up various accounts. If you have like 5 people in your household, you would go ahead and set up and they're all going to be utilizing the same computer. You'd set up your administrator account and set up an account for each of the 5 people. And establish what access each is allowed. You're not necessarily going to allow a 5-year-old the same access you're going to allow, somebody who's 25. And well, who knows, maybe depending on the maturity level of the 25-year-old, you may reverse it and allow the 5-year-old more access. Who knows? But all that can be set up within user accounts. Then we have the folder option. Lets you configure kind of the look and feel, how you want your files to be displayed in the Windows Explorer. Do you want them in a list? Do you want them in a grid? Large icons, small icons. You can hide extensions if you wish. And just basically kind of, you know, if the person doesn't have access to those files, you want those files to be grayed out to where they can see them, they just can't click on them, or do you want it to where they're completely hidden so they don't even know what's there? You know, this is where you would go and actually set up those options in your system. System utility allows you to configure your basic system elements. You can view the components of the computer. You can see how much RAM you have, what kind of CPU. If you go in and you have a 4-core processor and it has multi-threading, when you go into the CPU settings, what would you see? It's a 4-core processor with multi-threading. How many cores?
4.
8. Why?
If it's
Multi-threading.
4-core and each of them have multi-threading, there should be at least 2 for each.
Yes, so it's performing multiple functions or multiple threads at a single time. So a single core will appear as 2. So if you have a 4-core, you'll see 8 cores. If you have an 8-core, you'll see 16 cores when you go in the system. And that's just how the system will view it because of the multi-threading technology. Questions? All right. Windows Firewall essentially does as the name implies. It is there to protect your system, block incoming and outgoing connections to the system unless they are verified and allowed. You can manage this through your access control lists, and you can create those yourself, or you can use generic settings where they would have, you know, basically almost no protection, medium, or high. And then if you have it set on high, it will try to figure these rules out over time. If you say, you know, if a system or program is trying to contact the internet and you hit allow, it's going to add a rule to that access control list saying, you know, this system or this program is allowed to make contact to the internet, so we will no longer bug you about it. And then if you say deny, from that point forward, it will deny it and also add that to the access control list of the firewall that will allow, you know, programs trying to contact externally or external programs trying to come inside. But again, we will get into firewalls a little bit more, talking about stateless and stateful firewalls and the difference between them. Power options. Went over this in the Kahoot earlier today. That's where you can set up your hibernate options, power plans, sleep and suspend, when it would do these things, standby mode, low power mode, if you're using a UPS system, all that fun stuff would be typically established within power options and how you want it to be handled. If you're out and about and you're starting to run low on battery life, you can go through power options, turn off, you know, essentially a lot of other functions and buy yourself time to be able to get to a power source to be able to charge up your batteries. If you're at a convention or something along those lines where power, you know, plugs aren't necessarily, you know, all over the place, that would be a way to kind of extend your time until you can get a way to actually charge it, especially if you're going to be giving presentations or something along those lines. Programs and features. This was formerly known as add and remove. So almost anything you add through third parties or stuff you downloaded from, say, the Microsoft Store or any of that stuff, you could go through programs and features and they'll have a laundry list of stuff that is available to you, but they didn't put in the actual original download because they're not trying to over bloat your system. And from here, you can click add and it will go ahead and download those programs for you, kick them over so that they can be installed. Or if you install third-party applications, you can go back through this system later. If you're done with that program, you no longer want to use it again, and you wish to uninstall it, this would be a good place to go and remove those programs. So program and features is essentially where you would go to manage what different programs and files are actually on your system. Questions so far? All right. Home group. Not available in Windows 7 Starter. It's essentially an app that kind of simplified home networking for small businesses and stuff like that. Allow you to, you know, share files, printers, all kinds of fun stuff, work as essentially a very small network. I believe the maximum you could have on a home group was 25 computers. Now, much like when we say minimum requirements for a program, where it says that is the bare minimum to actually get the program running and function, home group is the technical ceiling. Although if you go that route, there's a lot of heavy use on the network, it's going to be barely functional. I think optimal on it, you're looking at 10 to 15 users on a home group for actual optimal use if you're going to have a bunch of people accessing files and communicating with the other devices. And it is available on 7, 8, 8.1, and 10, I believe. Although I thought they changed the name of it on 10. I'll have to verify that. Devices and printers. Pretty much where you would go manage a lot of peripheral devices. If you have external hard drives, scanners, fax machines, printers, all that fun stuff, you would manage that here. This is where you would see the initial install. The computers recognize it, giving you a basic driver. Then you can go right click on it, go for updates, update drivers. If you know there's a driver update, you can actually go out and download it manually if you wish. But the point is they will have a lot of times a basic driver on there to get you functioning. And what is the name of the place where that basic driver would be stored?
HCL.
And that is called the, you are correct, Magus, but what does that stand for?
Hardware compatibility list.
Very good. Hardware compatibility list. That's where we're going to store our basic drivers so we can get devices up and functioning. And then we can go out and update those drivers to get full functionality. Good job. All right, sound, pretty straightforward. So we can turn up, turn down the volume, mute it, set our left and right balances, all that fun stuff, If we install like a 3D sound card or something like that, we want to upgrade that sound. We're typically going to be going into a third-party applet and not necessarily managing it from here. This would be the sound system for the internal built-in speakers for the system, or if you have plugged in external speakers as well. Troubleshooting. Now, so we can pull this up real quick. For those of you who have done any remote bit of scripting, not sure if you were aware, but the source code for Windows Troubleshooter was leaked.
You might have to explain it, Kelly.
So like
All
that
right.
literally just saying it just waits and then just sends out a print that says unable to fix.
Basically, yeah. So it's you know, like he calls itself Windows Diagnostic. You ask a problem and it says, it prints out and just tells you looking for the problem. Then it waits for a few seconds, then it says unable to fix the issue. which if any of you have ever worked with Windows Troubleshooter, that's typically what you get. So it basically became a meme that people had put that out there. All right. Enough picking on Microsoft for the moment. Network and sharing center. Basically just a centralized location where you would let them, let the system know, hey, these files are okay to share. They're in this section. These are the only ones I want to share. I do not want, everybody on the system to have access to, say, like my tax returns, or something along that lines. I just want them to have access to the movies and the music and books or whatever I have in this particular file folder. Anything outside of that is off limits. I also want them to have access to the printer I have hooked up to my computer, or an external hard drive that I have for network attached storage. So the network and sharing center is where you would go to absolutely set this up. Device manager, that is where you would go for all your hardware configurations. And this is another place where you could also update the drivers on an individual basis if you wish as well. We'll give you a menu to go ahead and select that. And I shared the wrong screen. Go me.
It happens, man.
I know, man. One of these days I'll get it right. Yay, right one. All right, questions so far? All right. Here are a list of the top used applets within the control panel and their commands that you can use to access them real quick in the search folder if you so wish. This would take you straight to it, although a lot of times if you just search for it, you can get there pretty quickly. Like if you want to get to the command line, what is the quickest way you could write the search to get to your command line? Does anybody know that right off the top of their head?
CMD.
CMD, there you go. That is the quickest way to get to it. So you just go to your search function, type in CMD, it'll bring up the box for it. You go ahead and click on it and take you right into the command line interface. You do not need to memorize all of these. This is mostly just here to kind of give you an idea as to what is out there. And this will be more useful when you get out into the actual IT world versus the exam. It's just kind of a visual descriptor of what you will see. All right, questions so far? All right, cautions and considerations. All right, so best way to kind of prevent users from making any kind of drastic or catastrophic changes to your system as a whole is to use the USC or user access control. This would be done through the administrative accounts, and you can establish what they're able to change, what they're not able to change. As I had described earlier, my previous company, they wouldn't even let us defragment a hard drive, run a virus scan, any of that stuff, rather than them running the risk of you turning off a antivirus or something like that. They just went ahead and denied you access to it. And they set up regular scans and defragmenting to be done during off shift hours so that all that stuff was going ahead and taken care of. You didn't need to mess with it, but they just did not want you having access so you would inadvertently turn something off that would harm the system. Most issues, if they are created, can be solved by using restore points. Now, again, we mentioned earlier that this is, they say it is automatically turned on, but it is not. You need to go ahead and go in and turn on restore points. And if you so choose, you can set up where it will create a regular restore point every week or so. And then you can say, keep like 3 months worth or 2 months worth of restore points and delete them after that. But it gives you an option of where you need to go back to try to figure out where the system got corrupted if something goes wrong. And again, before you do updates or anything major like that, you might want to just go ahead and create a restore point just in case it negatively interacts with other applications that you have on your system. It allows you a quick way to kind of just jump back to a previous point in time and maybe wait on doing that update until updated drivers are done for your applications or whatever it is that it's interfering with. So on top of restore points, though those are a nice function, you also want to set or create backups of your hard drives as well as other, critical file systems, just to be safe, because restore points are only as good as the hardware that they are stored upon. If something happens to that hard drive gets, if it's an external, gets knocked, and it's a mechanical, gets knocked off your desk and it gets damaged in the fall, if it just wears out over time, you want to have backups of that data. Me, I've gotten so paranoid about it, I have 2 backups. I have an additional backup in the house for a quick restart that I update about every week. And then I have a tertiary backup that I actually store off-site somewhere else in case something happens to my house. At least I have, all my data saved, because I have like family photos that go back a couple generations that I've scanned in there, and all kinds of other stuff that is pretty much irreplaceable, and I don't want to run any risk of losing it. So always consider backups, because that is something that most people don't think about until after their first major data loss. All right. So we talked about earlier, you can use the UAC to restrict access to particular segments of the system, and the entire applications can be blocked off where they can't use them. And if they try to access them, so if it's you that's trying to access it and you have the administrator access, you can go ahead and put in the administrator password, which will grant access. Or if you are there and you want to grant them temporary access, you can go ahead and give it to them temporarily. So when the next time they, sign back in, they won't have that access again. Questions with regards to user access control or user accounts control? Lost my chat. Hold on. There it is. There we go. All right. Moving along. Group policy. You can essentially, much like the UAC, you can restrict access through group policy. As a general, anybody who's not an administrator does not have access to this particular thing, and it can just plain hide it so they can't find it anyway. By default, if you do not adjust it, they will essentially have pretty open access to anything in the with regards to applets, control panel, all that fun stuff. They will have access to it, be able to adjust it, manipulate it, do whatever to it, unless you actively change it. And the search bar of the start menu, you type in that command right there, the GP edit, which would be the group policy editor, and would allow you to set in there what they're allowed to access and what they're not allowed to access, and who's allowed to access it. Because you might allow yourself pretty free reign outside of the administrator account, just for ease of use, but not necessarily everybody else who's using it in that computer. Also, if you're setting a group policy for 50 computers, you want to make it kind of easy for yourself and just say in general, if you're not an administrator, you do not have access to this. Question. Still waking up. All right. Here's basically what it would look like within the group policy, just to kind of give you an idea where you could sit there and you could set it prohibit access to control panel rather than always, allow access. And if you prohibit access, it could just make it gray, or you could actually hide whole items to where they can't even see they're there. Even if they search for them, they will not come up and they just will not have access at all. And one of the good things to make sure they don't have access to would be the group policy editor, because you don't necessarily want them coming in and changing the group policy. Questions so far? All right. Optional, we just kind of got into that. The new ones that they kind of added here would be BitLocker, which is full drive encryption. That is new with Windows 10. We will get into that one a little bit more later. And the Sync Center for mobile devices. Oh, there we go. Full desk encryption. And I kind of just explained it. Okay, but we just talked about it. Now, as such, we are at 10:42. I know I went a little bit over because of where we would normally go to a break, but I wanted to kind of push through and get us to this point. Does anybody have any questions? Comments? Suggestions? If not, throughout this particular technical session, should be able to describe how you can use the control panel to customize the operating system for a client or yourself, describe the key steps and considerations when configuring a Windows client, and identify common pitfalls that can occur when configuring and how to solve them. This concludes our technical session for this AM. I'm going ahead and stop the recording.